Hi, my name is Arun. I'm one of the technical leads on the downstream deployment services, and today I'm going to talk about the integration tracker. It's sometimes also referred as delivery data dictionary. In the admin capabilities recording, I had mentioned about this tracker and the user friendliness that it brings to the table. We saw that we have the option of exporting the data dictionary out of the system using the admin screen, and that's auto generated. It gives you the list of all the different import and export tasks, which is good for a developer who is trying to build the integration between your ERP and with Ariba P2P. This Ariba P2P integration tracker is an alternative to that, except that this is much more user friendly, and you can use this for tracking your progress through the course of deployment as to where you stand in terms of the master data entities or the transactional integration, and what files are you going to use, and where are you sourcing it from, how frequently you are loading, and all such things. Okay, so without further ado, let's just take a look into the integration tracker that we have and see how it can be leveraged. Okay. So it basically is a workbook, and I'm going to talk about the different columns and tell you how the details have been arranged and how you can leverage them. So the very first column that I'm going to talk about is the file name. Basically, it contains the name of the file that is going to create an entity or an object in the Ariba system. Every file name will be having its corresponding import and export task. That's what you see in the auto-generated data dictionary. So for example, purchasing unit would have import purchasing units, and the corresponding export task could be export purchasing units. One thing to note about the file name is that the import purchasing, when you're going to import the purchasing unit, you will use the file name as you will use the file name as purchasing unit.csv. But when you go ahead and run the export task for the same object, the auto-generated file name by Ariba will be purchasing unit export.csv. So what Ariba does is basically goes ahead and suffixes the word export to all the file names when it generates the file. Something small that you need to keep in mind. The next column is the task. So if you have to load this file into the system, then what is the exact task name that you need to use in order to go ahead and load that file into Ariba? For example, if you're going to load purchasing unit, the task would be import purchasing unit. Similarly, account type, it would be import account types and all such things. And we have listed the task names for each and every entity so that you are able to go ahead and use the correct task in order to load the file into the system. Okay. Okay, the next column is basically the file description. It talks about the file. It gives you a very user-friendly description of what this file is designed to achieve in Ariba P2P. Okay, it basically describes the file object. It describes what is it going to be used and in what fashion can it be leveraged. The next column is when is this task needed. Now know that this tracker has listed out almost all the files that can be used in P2P, but obviously not all of them are absolutely needed in order to leverage or use P2P. It all depends on what features and functionalities you are planning to use in P2P, and depending upon that, a particular file will be used or omitted from being loaded into the system. So when is this task needed talks about when you're going to need this file to be used in the system, and under what and what functionality is going to be driven by this file. Okay. The next column talks about the file dependencies. This is pretty much covering the referential integrity that we see in databases. So if you see, most of the time you will see purchasing unit as one of the file dependency. If you're an SAP customer, then company code will be a file dependency. So if you're going to have multiple files being loaded into the system and there are interdependencies, then this column will list it out. But not necessarily it has to be loaded before you load a particular object. For example, in this screen, I can see that company code.csv has listed purchasing unit.csv as the file dependency, which means that if you're going to use purchasing unit, then absolutely you need to load the purchasing unit.csv and then follow it by company code.csv. But if you're not going to use purchasing unit, then you don't have to go ahead and load this. You can directly go ahead and load the company code.csv. So it all depends on what features you're going to exploit in P2P, and whether the corresponding files are going to be loaded into P2P or not. Okay. And the next column talks about which files are available for P2P. Almost all files are available for P2P. I think the only exception is going to be the punch-in group. We don't need punch-in group. It's designed for a different solution, but since it's a tracker, I have listed it out, but you don't have to worry about if you are deploying P2P. The next column is the UI alternative. What it basically means is whether there exists an alternative for the admin user to go ahead and create objects via the UI. What it means is can I go into the UI and do a create purchasing unit or create user or create supplier and all such things. So for most of the files, the UI alternative is no, but for very commonly used entities such as suppliers and users and such, and for commodity codes, we do have the UI alternative. One thing to note about the UI alternative will allow you to create one record at a time. So if I'm going to create suppliers and I say create new supplier, then I will be able to create only one supplier at a time. Whereas of course the file mechanism allows you to load a bunch of records at the same time in a batch fashion into and creates multiple records in Ariba. Okay. The next column, Ariba provided SAP code. This is specially designed for SAP customers, or if you're an ECC, if you have SAP ERP, then we provide a set of transport code that can be installed on the ECC, and you could run them and extract the data from your ECC and load that into Ariba. One thing to note about Ariba provided SAP transport code, it's very generic, so you definitely have to make sure that you are taking care of filtering the data or introducing any conditional extract that needs to be accommodated when the data is extracted and loaded. For example, the code that Ariba provides will extract all the suppliers from your ECC and have it ready to be loaded into Ariba. But maybe you don't want all suppliers, you only want to load the indirect purchasing suppliers into Ariba, in which case you need to go and tweak the transport code in order to put the filter in place and extract the suppliers that you need to have in Ariba and load it into Ariba. Okay. The next column talks about web service option. Web service basically allows you to do immediate transfer of data from one system to another. You will see that the web service option is not available for most of the master data. The integration where it is very heavily and primarily designed to be used is the transactional integration. So all the transactional integration will have the web service option available. For example, all the purchase order you could extract using the web services. Requisitions could be loaded via web services. Payments could be extracted via web services. Similarly, remittance advice can be loaded via the web services. So it is primarily designed for your transactional integration. Most of the master data, in fact, none of the master data are going to support your web service option to load the data into Ariba. Okay. The next one is whether it is required for customers. So this column basically indicates whether you are going to use a particular feature or use a particular file to be loaded into Ariba. Like I said a little while ago, this list contains a lot of files. It doesn't mean that you have to load all of them in order to use Ariba. It only depends on what features you are going to use, and based on that you will control the list of the files that needs to be loaded into Ariba. For example, if you're not going to use the budget feature, or if you're not going to leverage taxes in Ariba, then you don't have to load the tax files, you don't have to load the budget files. Okay, so this column will help you understand which file needs to be loaded and track only those files. That other column, the next column, talks about the owners of these files. Most of the master data files are going to be extracted from ERP, meaning ERP is the source of truth, and you as a customer would be responsible for loading those, owning the data loads, basically owning the extracts and owning the responsibility of loading the files into the Ariba. Okay, now not all the files are tagged against customer. There are some files which can be loaded only by Ariba personnel, in which case Ariba will be helping you to get those data in place and have them loaded into Ariba. Okay, the next few columns are where the real tracking aspect of this workbook comes into play. Basically, it contains a maintenance method. The next column is maintenance method, which indicates how are you going to maintain this file in production or going forward. There are a couple of options that we have listed, and you could expand this list if you like. The first option is you're going to do an automated schedule load, which is what most of our customers do, and which is what we have been recommending to our customers too. Sometimes it's not possible to do automated load, in which case the other option is the manual file load. But even if that's not available or feasible, then you can go and create it, load it via the UI, and the last option is the hybrid. So if you're going to have multiple options coexist at the same time, then that's what hybrid means. So depending upon your landscape architecture, depending upon your feasibility, depending upon how willing you are to put in the effort to automate it or to have a process to load it manually, then you can select the appropriate option to load the file into Ariba. Okay, the source system, the next column, the source system basically talks about what is the source of the data for the file that we are loading into Ariba. If depending on it, it mostly depends upon your landscape architecture. Like for example, the user files could be sourced from your HR module, and your accounting information can be sourced from your ERP module. So it exactly depends. It very much depends on the different landscape or different modules that you have in your landscape, and how you're going to leverage sourcing the data. And if there are multiple sources for a particular file, then how are you going to collate the data before you load that into Ariba? Okay. The next column, frequency, basically indicates how frequently are you going to load the data into Ariba. So there are few options when it comes to loading the data. Now, not all the data is going to be loaded every day or very frequently. For example, if you're going to employ purchasing unit, mostly you will just see it getting loaded once during production cutover, or when we are getting the project started. Similarly, tax types, commodity codes, these things they never change once the project has been initiated or once you go live. So there would be some files which are always one time, so you just have to indicate the frequency as one time. But there could be other files which are not one time, but they're not as frequent as other files. For example, tax code definitions. Tax code definition, they rarely change. The tax codes, the tax rates, these things, they don't change unless and until law comes along and changes them. So maybe you can touch them once a year and you would be okay with it. So you have to indicate the frequency accordingly. But other files such as your supplier data, your accounting information, your user data, all these things needs to be loaded almost every day. And some customers, depending upon how their business are, you would see more frequent load needed for accounting information. So you would be loading the accounting information every hour. So it depends on the object that we are dealing with, and this column will help you identify how frequently it needs to be loaded, because every frequency will be tied with a schedule of how we are going to manage or how we are going to load them into Ariba. Okay. The next two columns, due date and completion date, this basically helps you track where you are in terms of your progress towards completion of getting your master data integration in place or the transactional integration in place. We and where it comes very handy is when the project ownership changes hands, or the administrative ownership changes hands during the course of the deployment. For whatever unforeseen circumstances, we have seen that some projects tend to go slower than what we have planned, and it's possible that the ownership would change during the project cycle, and you can leverage this integration tracker to indicate where we are in terms of getting the files created and loaded into the system. Okay, status basically indicates where we at what stage the file loads are. For example, the different options that we have provided are the design, build in progress, testing, and complete. Eventually, we would like to see all the files that have been marked as required for your deployment getting into the complete status. The last column, comments, basically you can put in some additional comment as to who is going to be responsible for doing this. If there is a different team that you need to coordinate your efforts, then of course put those in the comments, so that anyone who is taking a look at the integration tracker, trying to understand how far we are in terms of getting everything completed, they will know who to look after, who to check with in order to get the true status. Okay. So like I said, this tracker, we have designed it with the intention that it would help you understand what, when I just look at a particular file name, account type.csv, what it means, and who is going to maintain it, how frequently are we going to maintain it, what is the source for that system and for that file, and all such things. And this is something that you are going to own. The integration tracker is going to be owned by you, the tech lead on the project. He or she will help you walk through the integration tracker, help you maintain it in the beginning, but eventually I would encourage that you as a customer go ahead and take the responsibility of owning it, so that you are able to keep track of it in the right fashion, and you don't miss anything. So those were all the columns. Now let's look at the rows. Let's look at how the records or the file names have been arranged. At the very top, all the files that have been listed, they belong to the common or the accounting section. So every file in this will be representing the accounting entity in Ariba P2P. Cost center, internal order, general ledger, company code, account category, all such things. Next comes your suppliers. So these are the files that are needed in order to get the supplier files or supplier entities created in Ariba. Similarly, custom groups. Groups basically control what kind of permissions will a user have in the system, and custom groups allows us to define some custom enterprise friendly groups, and we can tie the permission to those custom groups, and you can once again, these are some of the examples of what can be a one-time load into the system. Okay. Then comes users and groups, defining the user entity so that users are able to access the system and such. Payment details, commodities. Again, these files pertain to the object or the entity that I have listed in column A. Taxes and budgets. Again, these are not absolutely mandatory, but if you are going to leverage the features of tax or budget, then you need to go ahead and load these files. Okay, similarly for fund management, advance payments, custom files and approver lookup tables. Quick note about approver lookup tables. Approver lookup tables, even though they are going to be sourced from your ERP, it's possible that it is driven by your processes. Approver lookup tables are basically helper files that are designed to drive your approval mechanism in P2P. For example, you might have cost center approvers, or you might have commodity approvers. Then we will be putting together a helper file that will indicate who should approve when a particular cost center is selected, or who should approve when a particular commodity is being purchased. So it controls the approvals of the requisition before a PO is generated. So the custom, it's possible that the approver lookup tables we will introduce more lookup tables depending upon your approval design in your enterprise, and this is where the list of the files is going to be fluid. Similarly, with the custom files, um, we um, we might see a need depending upon your functional requirements that we have to create some new entities in Ariba, or new data structure that doesn't exist out of the box today, in which case we will create them and we will introduce them into this tracker so that it gets tracked accordingly. Okay, so whatever we have seen so far are all the master data related objects. From purchase order onwards, everything is transactional. So now master data is going to be needed in order to create the transaction, and these integration points help you integrate the transaction or extract the transaction from P2P and load them into your ERP. Okay, so you have purchase orders, and then you have receipts and requisitions and payments, invoices and remittance advice. All these are transactional documents. All these are transactional documents, and we have options, either file load or web services load, to get these transactions out of P2P and load that into Ariba. Load that into your ERP. Okay. That's pretty much about the integration tracker homepage. Now you might see there are many more tabs or worksheets in this workbook. What they are basically more details about a particular object. For example, if I want to know what is item category, so I just go in and click on this item category, and it will open up the corresponding worksheet that gives me detailed information of item category.csv. So item categories.csv contains 4 different columns. You could go in and export the item category and it will give you the columns, but you might wonder what these columns are and what do they represent. So this integration tracker also gives you those details. So there are 4 columns. What is the description for those columns? And if you are creating this file from scratch, then it also helps you understand when is this column required, what data you need to populate, if there are any data restrictions such as the length of the data should not cross 25 characters or it should not cross 50 characters, then all such things are listed out here. Okay. And we also have a mapping, a column called customer mapping. So if you are going to automate this, then you can use the individual worksheet here to map it to particular table and a file, a field name in your ERP. Now we don't see this being aggressively used by our customers, but the option exists if you want to. If Ariba deployment is part of a big program and you want to make sure that you're tracking everything that's going on in terms of integration, and you want to make sure that you're coming up with a foolproof integration tracker, then definitely go ahead and leverage this column. We definitely encourage that, and the option exists. So similarly you will see we have listed that out for all the files that needs to be imported into Ariba, because it will help you understand how the file needs to be created. If you're going to work with a developer who is going to automate the extract of the file, you could give him the requirements in terms of what you're looking for and how many columns and what data type and all such things. Okay. All right. So yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. Let me think if I'm missing anything. One good thing about this integration tracker is the way it is laid out. So the order in which the files are listed out is the order in which you need to load the files. For example, if you have like 25 different files, you cannot just start loading them alphabetically or in any order you choose, because there could be interdependencies between the files. So if you have the files, and you can just go ahead and load the files in the order that's listed out in this tracker, because this will take care of the referential integrity automatically. Okay. Okay, let me think. I think this is all I wanted to talk about. Once again, integration tracker is a user-friendly tracking mechanism for all the different files that can be used in Ariba. It talks about all the different import tasks for the master data file, also lists out the different transactional export options in the system. You can use this tracker to find out where you are in the project cycle. You can find out what is the source of the system, how frequently you're loading it, and how you're loading it. Okay. And once again, this is not an auto-generated file. This is manually maintained. So if you go ahead and create new files or introduce new columns into the pre-existing files, then we need to make sure that you go ahead and add those files or fields explicitly into this tracker manually. The data dictionary is what is automatically generated. You could leverage the data dictionary, but you should use the integration tracker to keep track of how much progress you have made in terms of integration activities for both master data and transactional integration. Okay. I think with that I come to the end of this presentation and recording. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is on the screen. Email me, drop me a note, or if you have some time, definitely give me a call, and I would be happy to help you answer your questions. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. I hope this is useful. Again, if you have questions, reach out to me. My name is Arun, and one of the technical leads on the deployment downstream services. Thanks. Bye bye.